Okay, so I've Marie's left me in the lurch, so Marie and Lisa are both unavailable today. So this is my first time hosting an On the Wire. So if I'm a bit clunky, you'll have to excuse me. And I think we've got a few old hands here today. Just let Coralie in. That have been on this radio before. So we might actually be doing quite a bit of sharing stories for people to follow up on video afterwards, because I think a lot of people here are really experienced at this already. I'm going to start the way Marie always starts a meeting, by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands that we're on. I'm coming from Gadigal land, and Marie generally asks people to pop in the chat what traditional lands they're beaming in from today. So if I can acknowledge all of our traditional custodians and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Sorry, I thought there was somebody else waiting to get in. So yeah, pop in the chat where you're from. And I was actually going to run a little poll, but I haven't really got a lot of people here yet, so we might just hold off on that one. So what I wanted to do is check in with people about where they're at, and I know we've got Jenny and John who have already completed their accreditation, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, and where are you at, Liska?
So we have our visits planned for August next year. So we're just working through the standards at the moment. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And you've got how many shelters in your group?
9.
Yeah. So it's a big job.
It is. Actually, one of them doesn't currently receive DCJ funding. So I think technically they don't have to undertake it. But I think I'm going to encourage them to do it anyway.
Yeah, it's good practice, I think.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, sure. And Steph, where are you at? I think you've fairly recently joined or engaged Highwire, haven't you?
Yes, that's right. We're aimed for October next year, so we're in self-assessment phase at the moment. Yeah.
Okay, great.
We've got 7 homelessness services. So yeah.
So you've got a pretty good job as well, yeah.
Yeah.
And Coralie, I'm not sure if you can hear us. Are you there, Coralie?
Oh, hang on. I am. Hi.
Hi, Coralie. Nice to see your face.
And I know Steph, so.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
And you're probably about the same phase as Steph as well. I think you're aiming for around later next year as well.
Yeah,
you?
about November.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So we've got a few with another year's work to go. So that's cool. Good. Okay. So I think, one of the things that often comes up is that the load of getting an organisation through ACES assessment often falls on one person, who sometimes starts to go under in the process. And what I wanted to do is work through some ideas of how we can share that load, and what are appropriate ways to share out the work, and how you can actually engage organisations to do it. So we have got, as I said, a couple of people that are old hands at this now that can, I'm hoping, will share some ideas of things that they felt they did really well, that worked well in terms of engaging the rest of the organisation. And if you want to share anything that didn't work well, or things that you wish you'd done earlier, perhaps there might be some real benefits for the people here that have still got a year of this work to go. So yeah, I'll just quickly introduce, for those that don't know them, Jenny is from St Lawrence House in Sydney. St Lawrence House is a a small organisation that offers medium-term accommodation to youth. So very tiny staff. John's from Veritas House now you're in Orange or Bathurst or both. Where do you hail from, John?
The organisations in both. I'm based in Orange.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you're also youth services. Am I right? A mix.
Permanency support, a variety of the DCJ funded permanency support programs, yes.
Yeah, yeah. And what sort of size staff have you got, John?
We've been growing, so I think it's now a bit over 100, maybe 100, 120,
Oh, I see.
something like that.
Yeah, big group. Yeah, yeah. And LISCA's an interesting group because you've got community shelters. So you've got 9 separate organisations that are coordinating under one big cases assessment.
Yes, that's right. So we're being assessed as an organisation, and then I think 4 of our sites as well. Yeah.
Oh, taking on independent assessments.
Yes. Well, that'll all be done as a whole. We're a bit weird.
You're like weird. Okay. And Steph, you've got 7 homelessness shelters.
Yeah, that's correct. So 7 different sites.
Yeah. And what sort of size staff have you got?
11.
Right. Okay. So
We've got a couple of background
funny.
staff. So yeah,
Yeah.
13
Okay.
with some background half-dayers and stuff.
Wow.
We're an interesting organisation too. We've split roles.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, challenging. Yeah.
Mm.
And Coralie, you're quite a small organisation as well, right?
Yeah, so we're only small. We only do case management. We don't do housing or homelessness itself, but we are funded under homelessness.
Okay. Right. Yeah. And a small staff, isn't it? Just a,
Yeah, it's only small.
yeah. Okay.
Currently recruiting.
Good luck.
Mm.
Okay. So I think as far as the total group of homelessness services that are undergoing ACEs, I think we're quite a long way down the track for, like, there's a significant number that have already undertaken and completed their assessments. And a lot of people feedback about if you take the approach of continuous quality improvement, and that it provides an opportunity for the organisation to take a really good look at a lot of processes. The feedback that you get from those organisations is really positive. So I think, a lot of people express how daunted they felt when they first started the process. There's like 100 indicators that you're going to be assessed against and how you're possibly going to get through all of that. But by the end of it, a lot of organisations agree that it was a really worthwhile process, and it's really brought some great new processes to the organisation and engaged people a lot more. So that's what it's meant to do. So hopefully people will enter into it in that spirit, but it's not always the case, and sometimes it's really hard to get people along that journey. So I thought maybe Jenny and I had a little chat about this a couple of days ago. Jenny had some thoughts about how it flipped around. So she saw a real change in her organisation. Do you want to share that with us, Jen?
Yep, sure. So at the beginning, because we're a very small organisation, at the beginning, we had a whole lot of groans and moans about, how do we climb this mountain? We don't have enough staff, we barely have enough staff to deliver services. How do we divert our energies from service delivery, which is, where our heart is, into getting ACEs? So my first challenge was really how to engage the staff at looking at this as an opportunity. And as Kay and I discussed yesterday, I actually had to tap into their heart. They deliver services from the heart. Their whole being is about the care of their clients. So I made it all about improving the services for the outcomes for clients. So I saw it as an opportunity. And once we got going and we started to get a few ticks in boxes, I think they also saw this as a huge opportunity to look at our services and really work out what improvements we could make. I also used our starting point. I think there's nothing worse than when you're starting a project and you've got 0 runs on the board. It's daunting when you've got to get 100 ticks in the box to get to the end of accreditation and you've got no ticks in the box. So we started with a self-assessment, and I was able to show them that we already were 32% of the way of having some ticks in boxes. So not fully in place, but partially in place. And I think that gave us a starting point that made the mountain not quite so unsurmountable. And I did find that to get our board on board, so to speak, I actually had to measure our progress every 3 months so that I could show them that we were 32%, we were 42%, we were 54%. And then they started to feel, I suppose, that this is doable. And then I got their engagement as well. So it
Sounds
was
like the when you have the church spire fundraising graphic, where they keep topping it up.
it was a little bit like that, because I'm on the board, but I was heading this project, so I reported to the board every month, and it was a little bit like that. It was like the graph that just kept growing, and we watched the enthusiasm. So they actually got excited about my report. Oh, Jen, where are we up to this month? How are we going? And that had a flow-on effect to staff. Once the staff felt that we had the board on side, then they also got a lot more motivated.
Fantastic. What was your experience, John?
Talking here about involving the team and involving staff in the project. Staff involvement's kind of like, world peace. Everybody's in favour of it, and we all agree it's a great idea, but it never quite seems to get there, where the results always fall short. And I'm certainly in favour of it. I'm a big fan, but our experience was not quite as smooth as, I might be misrepresenting you here, Jenny, but perhaps not quite as smooth as the kind of slope that Jenny described. I guess partly this was the self-assessment process occurred over the peak of the kind of COVID disruption. So it was operationally, it was very difficult. Although I said earlier that Veritas House has 110, 120 staff, which it does, the majority of those staff are in the children's services area, and we only have 2 refugees, one in Orange, one in Bathurst, and a number of other youth homelessness programs that predominantly involve caseworkers, large part-time and casual workforces, very significant disruption as a result of COVID. And we also struggle operationally with reasonably high turnover of staff. So you've always, it's like the bath that's got the plug out. You've got both taps pouring in new staff at one end, and the trained staff are disappearing down the plug hole at the other. So the bath is never quite filling up. And what it means is operationally is that a significant percentage of staff in the team are always new. And it's very challenging to build a team, let alone an organizational culture in a context like that. So when I came, and I guess as I'm an operational compliance officer, and the task, I guess, of project managing the self-assessment and the eventually the site visit was kind of delegated to me. Operational management were enormously supportive of the process, were very invested in it, and right on side. But it was a very challenging context within which to try and ask staff who are often new, in many cases disoriented, maybe even resentful in some cases of the changes imposed on our working methods by COVID, to come on board with something that did very much look like, you know, what Jenny was talking about earlier. Oh, it's just another thing on top of everything else. How are we gonna do this or whatever? So, although we did go to we had a launch, which I've got to say was actually a launch event for the team, which went really well, and staff exhibited at that time. The staff exhibited some real interest and engagement, and there was a very high-level conversation, I think, in terms of the quality of the conversation. Subsequent disruptions to the functioning of the team meant that kind of high point that we achieved at the launch was difficult to sustain. So I guess my observations would be that in terms of getting staff engagement with some of those questions that you asked in that document you shared with me, Kay, getting the team to engage with some of those questions and talk reflectively about those. The most effective way of approaching that was with ops management and team leaders who were kind of primed, I guess, to manage the team meetings in which those things were discussed. So, in other words, to use their knowledge of their staff and the situations their staff were dealing with to kind of curate the conversation or seed it in ways that pull staff in, so that team, and this is, I mean, really basic, kind of team meeting stuff. How do you activate team meetings, which is often a challenge. It was really about knowing what an individual staff member might have been dealing with, and finding a way to connect that person and that experience to the the theoretical issue perhaps that the ACES standards were raising, to pull that person into the conversation by saying something about, well, Mary, like that situation that happened last week, do you want to talk about that, because that's
Right.
a perfect illustration of blah blah blah.
Yeah.
In those sorts of techniques to kind of pull people in. But I'd still have to say it was a very challenging process, and in the end, I would have to say the majority of the workload still fell to me, despite those active attempts to involve others. And I just got to be honest about that, because I know that it's Chatham House rules or whatever it is in these events, so I know that nobody's going to dob me in.
We won't dob you in, no. But I think, like, your point about focus, like finding that thing that gets somebody in, and I guess that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about today was if you go in with a bit of an idea of who you're going to target for what is often helpful. I've seen organisations like look at the full self-assessment shebang on the BNG portal, and I think I love your comment about world peace and everyone being in favour of it, because everyone kind of looks at that, that huge list of questions and goes, how are we going to answer that? It's so big, and yes, we need to do that, and it's all a really good idea, and yeah, someone else might do that. You know, like we won't sort of put our hands up for things. So I think, yeah, you do kind of have to go in and hit people up about, you know, what you're going to ask them to do. What I thought we could do as a little resource that we might be able to share, you know, put it up as a piece of work on our website afterwards with our resources for this session, was just a little matrix of, I've set up this matrix. Let me just screen share. And I just go to my matrix here. So what I've done is put all of the standards down the left-hand side and some broad categories of roles across the top. And I thought what we might do is just sort of try and plonk in some of the big tasks that need to be done, and who could actually take those on. So we're not kind of going, oh yeah, like, you know, we need to sort out our complaints handling and talking to the board and the CEO, and like, who's going to do that? So I think what I wanted to do is go, what are some things, you know, for instance, in the planning standard that we think the board really need to do? Like it needs to be a board role, and we want the board engaged in that, and pitch that to them and go, like, you know, if you do nothing else, really need you to take care of this. So, you know, some of those things that, like, you can't get someone else to do this, you know, like the board have to be involved in some things, you know, the frontline staff, the support staff have to do some things. They're going to get spoken to in the audit. So, you know, they really need to be across some of, you know, like this work. And if they've actually been involved in the work, in, you know, building it up and creating, you know, developing the evidence pieces for it, or finding them, then so much the better. Like they'll speak to it with real authority. And that's really what you want, you know, when you get to your assessment day. But, you know, better than that, you know, these people will be the best ones to point you to some of this information. So, you know, you can go clonking around looking for, you know, the board minutes or whatever. But if the board can go, yeah, we talked about, you know, that situation in the July meeting, then you know to go and find the minutes of the July board meeting. So that's the sort of stuff that I thought we might be able to just put some really broad brush things in here. Does that make sense? So, you know, if we talk about, for instance, planning, strategic planning and business planning, is there something out of that you would want the board to do? Any thoughts on that? Like in terms of preparation for ACES, or just in terms of their practice in running the organisation, what's the board's involvement in planning, strategic planning and business planning?
So for our organisation, the board are responsible for the strategic plan.
So they actually develop it.
Yeah. So they're supported by our CEO and our COO in order to produce it, but it's their responsibility. And then our CEO and COO take forward the business plan.
Okay, so then they would be able to provide you with the planning documentation, right?
Well, we gave them the documentation, yeah. So we supported them in terms of the framework for it. So yeah, and then they but they're the ones who debate the strategic plan and yeah. So
they would be able to then talk to, yes, we
100%.
had a meeting, or we had a series of meetings, we talked about this, and, you know, here's the stuff, like here are the notes we took, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, we act as the sort of secretariat for it in terms of note taking and whatever, but yeah, we have a yearly strategy day that they all come to and commit to contributing towards.
So if you were in a self-assessment meeting with the board discussing this, you know, they would know then that it's an expectation of them that
100%.
they have
Yeah.
to do this, and they might just go, yeah, we've got all those planning documents, Liska, you know, I'll send them to you, or you can get them here, or whatever. That's as much as you probably need from them for that. But it's still like, you know, it's their responsibility, and it sort of puts it in their court in terms of the assessment. And I've got to say, like, you know, there's I've seen quite a few boards now who have not really taken on a lot of that onus. It's kind of like, well, I just, you know, the CEO or the management group provide that to me, and it's a bit passive. And I don't like, the ACES standards are not set up like that. Like it firmly falls with the board. It's their responsibility.
That they also take responsibility for board review.
Yes.
That's fully held by them. So
Review
actually,
of the
so yeah, and
progress.
yeah, that we were sort of more hands off with that, whereas we did facilitate to a large extent the strategic planning day.
Yeah.
The board review was entirely held by them, so they planned a survey and a matrix and sent it out, and yeah, so that was completely separate to
So
the
review of
executive.
what?
The board performance.
Their performance. Okay, so that's under
Yeah.
governance. Yep, cool.
Yeah.
Yep,
Oh, sorry, I'm jumping
Yep.
ahead. Kate.
that's all right. That's no problem. We can move on. Yeah, performance review. Oh, look at that. Going all over the place with fonts, but never mind. So yeah, self-assessments, yeah? Yep, that's fine. What other things do you reckon the board could do? Let's just pop around. Oh, anywhere in here. Partnerships, communication, service outcomes. Can you think of anything else that the board, you really need the board across?
We do get them also to get involved in the policy review process, and that's the policies that cover everything. It tends to be the ones that have any risk associated with them,
Yeah,
that the board are involved in. So the operational policies, we don't send to them because there's so many and it's too much. But
Yeah.
so for example, we have a risk and audit committee next week, and I have asked them to review our data breaches policy.
Yep.
Obviously with Optus and all the shenanigans that have been going on recently.
I would hope there's a lot of boards sitting up and taking notice about cybersecurity now.
Yeah, so we've got cybersecurity, notifiable data breaches, and our legislative compliance policy. So
Yes.
because they're three really key areas of risk, we want them to be across what our processes are, because ultimately they're responsible if things go south.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, you know, like risk is just like fairly and squarely the responsibility of the board, and they really need to get it. And, you know, if there isn't a good risk management framework in the organisation, then they should be intrinsically involved in building that up. Like I wouldn't make any bones about that it shouldn't be spoon-fed to them, because like it may need to the engagement of other people in the organisation, but they really should be driving, you know, the development of that and then ongoing review. So you should be seeing, you know, the risk register appearing in regular board meetings as, you know, a review topic. So are we adding anything to it? You know, have we had any incidents, whatever? So yeah, I think there's a lot of risk stuff that comes up in ACES that sits with the board. So they really need to get that.
We actually dedicate. Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I'll see if there's something else about it.
Oh, I think someone's just.
Oh. I was just going to say, Kay, that we actually dedicated the second half of our strategy day this year to risk, because what we wanted the board to come up with was a risk statement, so to identify what their appetite for risk was.
Right.
So we did sort of a real brainstorming session where we just gave them big pieces of butcher's paper to write down, to identify, you know, the areas of risk and what their tolerance for it was, so that we had a really good understanding, you know, of all the different potential areas of risk and what they have a low tolerance for and what they have a high tolerance for. So that was a really, really good exercise.
Great exercise. Yeah. And, you know, could potentially be a piece of evidence that you use. You can take photos of, you know, butcher's paper and put them up if you.
I've done with it now, but yeah, I'm sure I've got those.
You know, if it forms part of the story, because you know, you always need to go back to how do we deal with it in this organisation. So, you know, if it works, if you think that tells part of the story and it's a good piece of evidence, then by all means, you know, put it up there. It doesn't always have to be a perfect document. So, you know, people will put pictures of planning days, you know, pictures of paper, that sort of thing.
Okay. I would also say that the board has responsibility for the you know, the vision, mission and values kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I also think that there's a responsibility for delegations, I guess, understanding who's responsible in a big picture way, who's responsible for what across the organisation.
Yeah.
So I'd kind of throw them into the mix too. As a board
Perfect. So I've got a decent old list for the board just in governance. Let's keep flicking. Oh, goodness. I'm too good at twitching my fingers on this mouse. Let's keep buzzing down here. Let's not labour this too long. What about finance and contracts? That's like big ticket item on finance and contracts. Anybody got anything that they want to pop in here for the board to be cognizant of or even involved in working on?
Setting the budget.
Budgets, budget review.
Yeah, and then budget to actual reviews.
Yeah. So having a good idea of that process, how that happens. It kind of comes under risk, but I would also put in here, you know, risk planning for big expenditures or a process for big expenditures. Really not typing well today. Yeah. Anything else you want to put in here? What about people? Anything that you want the board to be understanding, like involved in with the people stuff? So human resources, work health and safety, diversity and inclusion.
The board has to be responsible for due diligence with work health and safety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They should be reviewing major incidents, or they should be looking, you know, at some point on a regular basis, an incident register. I know that those are often very small numbers in a lot of organisations, but looking for patterns and you know, opportunities for improvement in incident management is part of that process of review with the board. What about human resources? Anything in here that you would put as sitting with the board?
Responsible for executive or senior management appointment.
Yeah.
The CEO's appointment.
Yeah. I don't know. Is there somebody that could perhaps go on mute? That we're getting some background noise. Yep, and there was something that was discussed in the last session. Now, were you here, Liska, in the work health and safety area? Not sure if you recall. It was about wellness and about.
I don't think I was on that one. No, but yeah, I mean, I suppose a wellbeing program that in our organisation that does sit with the CEO and the managers. Actually, well, we actually talk about all of the staff being involved in it. Yeah. I mean, I was just reflecting on something that John's just said, and I don't know where this falls within the standards, but ethical considerations are something that sits with our board in terms of as he was referring to the sort of the vision, values, mission statement, you know, we're conscious that they reflect diversity and inclusion. So, you know, whenever we make a decision and when we make recruitment decisions, that they are holding those or all of those values all the time.
Yeah, so providing that oversight or oversight, as I've written here. Yeah, and the thing I was hinting at was about staff wellbeing and having some oversight of that as well, because that's become of much more interest in the new standards. So yes, perhaps, you know, again, like not involved in the day-to-day stuff, but an oversight, a report back on, you know, a sort of a health check of the organisation. Partnerships, what's their involvement in partnerships? Anything? Would you be concerned about it? Would you be asking them to do anything?
We take some of our MOUs when we're looking, especially for consideration of partnerships, to ensure that they're aligning with the strategic direction. So quite often we'll run it past the board just for review, really, more than anything.
Yeah, and that is a question that's put to the board about their key partners, and you know, how does that process happen? How do you decide who's going to be your, you know, a key partner for your organisation? So yeah, it's a good point. Communication, service outcomes, consumer outcomes. Does anybody want to pop anything into these?
How about PR and media, organisational reputation?
Yep. How do you know that you're doing, that you've still, what's your reputation in the community? Are you out there assessing that in any way?
I'd in relation to service outcomes and consumer outcomes, I'd say boards are increasingly on notice that they have to have meaningful assurance about service quality. So in other words, it's not enough to say, oh, you know, we're doing good for, you know, the poor and the oppressed and all the rest of it. They've got to have a direct line of sight of service quality issues.
Yep. It's an excellent point. And probably outcomes as well. So, you know, you've developed your strategic plan. You've got a business plan hanging off that, but, you know, are you constantly checking back to see if you're doing what you set out to do? Because, you know, you're the steering group for this organisation. So, you know, you should be the big sanity check here. So, yeah. Yep. Okay. Consumer outcomes, anything particular there that you would want the board to be across?
Aware of feedback.
Yeah, feedback and complaints.
Yeah,
absolutely. Good and bad feedback and complaints management. So there's a lot of organisations who complaints management is, perhaps, to be kind, not their strong point. But I think, you know, I always attribute that to being a sector of fixers, so that, you know, people just fix what's wrong. But what that does is takes away your opportunity to identify areas for improvement. So if you've got 6 people in your organisation all fixing the same problem and not discussing it with each other, you're never going to know. You're inefficient in doing that, and you've just missed a really big opportunity. So I think, you know, there's a fair bit of organisation for a lot of organisations, a fair bit of work for a lot of organisations to do in thinking about how they look at complaints and encourage feedback, and not to see complaints and feedback as a bad thing. but as a real opportunity. So, and that's a cultural thing within staff as well. I think, you know, there's a lot of staff that are concerned about complaints, and that needs to be flipped to get a really good outcome from it. But if you can flip it, you can identify some really great things to do for your clients. So again, the board taking the lead on that, saying, give me, you know, what's happening. I want the feedback, creates that pull from the organisation to say, you know, like they're asking for it. They want to know what's happening. So if they're kind of, you know, batting it down, saying, let's not talk about this anymore, then you're never going to encourage your team to, you know, encourage your clients to give feedback. So it has to come from the top. Okay, I would like to, I'm not sure that we're going to get through all of this, but what I would really like to do is go to here now, because I think we know that the CEO and managers can do most of the work here. Can. Whether they've got time to is a whole other question, but they certainly would have a lot of the knowledge to do that. But that's not always the best thing. And sometimes getting the frontline staff and the support staff to get engaged in thinking about these indicators is a really healthy thing for the organisation. So I would like to have a little bash at this and see if we can come up with anything that we think that we can ask the people at the other end of the tree to get involved in. And yeah, like as John said, sometimes that can be quite hard. They feel like that's just, you know, they don't have any say in it. They, you know, it's just another thing being put on them. But Jenny might comment on this. What happened in your organisation?
With strategic planning, it is a responsibility of the board. But in the last strategic planning cycle, we turned it upside down. So we went out to the clients and we surveyed the clients about how they felt on certain topics. We asked the staff to all come to a planning day. And it's the best strategic plan we've ever had because it really meets service delivery, goals and outcomes for our clients. So it's a beautiful plan, I have to say. Very, very happy.
And they have so much insight, I think.
They have so much insight, but it was just a joy to watch them participate because as they got into it, the passion that came out for the service, the clients, the delivery outcomes was nothing short of amazing.
Yeah, yeah. And can I say, like, since I was involved in the assessment of St Lawrence House, to the board's credit, they were gobsmacked at what their young, you know, youth workers and caseworkers had to say. Like they were like really enthusiastic about having them involved. So I think it cut both ways, and that's got to go well for some of those, you know, part-time staff even. Like they loved being asked, and I think, you know, getting the ear of the board and being seen as credible, like, you know, an important source of information was really a big boost for them. So yeah, I think, you know, if people can say at their assessment day, yeah, like, you know, we got to say what our clients need, I think it's a really healthy thing for an organisation to be able to do.
Well, let me say we're doing our Q1 review of that strategic plan at the moment. And normally it's like getting blood out of a stone, asking people, have you done such and such? You know, oh no, I've been too busy. This time round, have you done such and such? Oh, you know, yes. And out comes all of this documentation and all of these meeting notes and minutes. And
they're really invested in it.
So I've just been doing that today and everything's gone green. So, you know, that's a pretty good indicator for me.
Beautiful. Yeah. Okay. What about their in the governance standard, so this might be something that you go, oh no, that all lives with the board and the CEO, but they get asked questions about some of this stuff. So what would you suggest is important for some of those frontline or support staff to know that comes under governance?
In terms of policy and procedures, we involve them in the operational review, on the cyclical review of all of the policies and procedures.
Yeah, perfect. So, yep, they don't just see them as something that sits on the shelf, that they're actually involved in saying whether they think it's right or not. Yep, beautiful. What else? Don't forget we've got data and knowledge management, risk management.
So some of our staff are involved in actually developing policy and procedures, because we've got 400 and something policies from Homelessness New South Wales, which we don't have them all. So
No, I think I'm auditing you, Steph.
yeah. Oh yeah, we have them all, and they're all very good. Yeah.
No, I don't want to read them.
And we were like, okay, so mindful that we've got people that have come out of university that did whole subjects in these areas, and you know, so using those skill sets. And then of course they get reviewed at another level, but
Okay. Look, they need to know, like, there's questions about data collection, so you know, get them thinking about what sort of information do you collect and why, what happens to it. And I think that's often the beef, is like, yeah, we have to fill out these forms or whatever, but what happens with it? So, you know, a bit of like a sanity check in the organisation to go, well, what are we doing with this stuff? You know, or what could we do with this information that we're collecting? And, you know, getting, you know, maybe trying to turn on some lights in, you know, in those people that have to actually do the boring stuff of filling out the forms and things, to see where that goes. And if it's not going anywhere, then I would say that's a CQI. Like, you know, you need to go back and look at it and go, if you're just collecting bits of data and putting them in a folder and not using it, then you're wasting everyone's time. So, you know, that's the sort of challenge to organisations, to go, no, like we reviewed that and we decided to stop asking this and start asking that, because that works in with our strategy better. So that's what we're going to do now. So getting people thinking about that is, you know, it can be tough, but, you know, little pieces at a time, you know, so just little bits of information, just a little CQI on that could be something they could do. And risk management. So not just thinking about occ health and safety or work health and safety, but, you know, more broadly speaking about risk. So, you know, one of the biggest risks in organisations is people, you know, like their well-being and turnover of staff, John. So, you know, why is that happening? You know, perhaps frontline staff have some input into that sort of thing. So there's potential there. I'm not suggesting you have to do this. It's just ideas of what you could get people involved in. Finance. Would you have them involved in anything there? Just process stuff?
Probably petty cash and
Yeah.
basic household, you know, cash handling.
Yeah. Do they get it? Do they understand what they're meant to do? Are they doing it? That sort of thing. So, you know, they might just be asked, you know, if you're working in a refuge and you know, the groceries are delivered, you know, what's the process? What's the process of buying groceries? You know, that sort of thing is a possible question that you could be asked. So, you know, they should be able to say, yeah, like, you know, we verify the order, or that's, you know, it's simple, but sometimes you find people just, they don't actually understand why they're doing things. So again, you know, it's an opportunity to tighten things up. What about in the people standard? There's some important things that your frontline teams can be involved in here.
Understanding work health and safety obligations.
Yeah, Yeah, rights and responsibilities. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. So make sure that they're all over that, and you know, that's not like it's right there in your face, work health and safety stuff. So you know, it's not rocket science. They just need to go, what are we supposed to do here? You know, what are my rights here? Where do I find out? That sort of thing. So you know, they could be, because if they don't get it, then as an organization, you're not servicing them very well. So, you know, for them to go, well, we don't understand and we need, this is the information we need. So, you know, you could quite possibly tackle work health and safety from their point of view rather than always pushing it down from management.
There's also the code of conduct stuff, you know, just looking across the table to the board, you know, there's that reference to ethics there.
Yeah.
And it's about conduct risk to an organisation and how staff understand what's required of them, I guess.
Yeah. Do they get it? Yeah, that's right. Are they clear on what they, you know, what their responsibilities are?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Another thing that falls squarely with them in terms of being like the audience is induction. So, you know, have you got a good induction program for newcomers? And your staff are the people that will tell you what needs to be in that induction program much more than, you know, a higher level of management person. So yes, there's some essentials, but in terms of, you know, what do I need to do my job? That's going to come from the staff. And, you know, a lot of inductions get managed quite chaotically. And a staff, you know, a group of staff members could, I think, easily nail a list of things that they want to see in an induction program. So they could create an induction checklist for you pretty quickly, I reckon, if you don't have one. So that potentially, if it's something that's not being done particularly consistently in the organisation, that's something that your frontline staff could get involved in, is sort of developing the induction program. Partnerships. Who do they deal with? They might have, you know, like just their communication with community partners or whatever organisations, referring agencies.
We encourage our staff to join any interagency meetings that are going on.
Yeah, interagencies is a good one. So yeah, and just making sure that, you know, if they go to those interagencies, that they, you know, that there's some kind of documentation around that and it's shared back with the rest of the staff. So, you know, how's that happen? If it's minutes of a meeting, then perfect. But, you know, that's sort of feeding back, you know, to ensure that everybody, like, you're not just going to the interagency to sit there, it's to, you know, contribute and get information back as well. What about, let's go down to consumer outcomes. What's an important one here?
Well, the evaluation or the feedback
Yeah.
usually comes through.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, really, that goes through the whole organisation.
Mm.
Yeah. But for them to understand exactly what they have to do with feedback and complaints is really important. So if they don't get it, and if they don't have the agency to deal with a complaint at the front line, then you're going to struggle. So, you know, you shouldn't have staff that go, oh, if I get a complaint, I just tell the manager, because that's the manager's problem. You know, the Ombudsman says you should be able to deal with it at the front line and only escalate it if the client's not satisfied. So giving them some more empowerment to deal with those complaints, to, you know, confidently deal with complaints at the front line and report them back as well. So I think they do deal with them, but they don't tell anyone. I don't mean that in a bad way, they just fix it. But yeah, I think, you know, getting some kind of reporting process is going. Listen, I think I've I'm never very good at time management, so I don't want to take heaps of your time, more of your time. But what I wanted to say was, like, we've got a couple of resources that you might find useful for your self-assessments. You might have already invented this for yourselves, but what we've done is set up these little templates for different groups within your organisation. So there's managers, there's staff, there's CEO, board, and we've aligned them with the standards. So the numbers are there. So if we look at the standard, for instance, availability of records, 2.2.5, does the organisation's records demonstrate its consistent application of policies and procedures for all areas of operation? What a boring question. But we've just kind of reworded it, saying, how could you demonstrate that your policies are routinely followed? What are some of the records that you keep? So what we're suggesting is, if it helps you, take these templates into your self-assessment meetings and go, guys, what do you got? You know, and you could even leave it with, you know, a group of people and go, this is your baby, you know, let's meet again in a month and you give me your answers here. So try and get them to take it on and answer the questions for you, and try to word them a little more friendlier. That's a little way of saying it. But yeah, in just a more sensible way than the standards they're not always that friendly to read. So people just go cross-eyed. So we've tried to sort of capture the intent of the standard in these questions. So if they're useful for you, we'll post it with the recording of this video on the site, and you can sit there, you know, have the portal open and be on screen share and type into it if that's how you like to work. You can just use this as a standalone document and fill it in if you want to. But what it does is focus things into groups rather than just asking everybody to look at everything. It's aligned with the questions that Highwire auditors ask these groups of people. So we don't go in with a big long list and ask the staff about, you know, board self-assessment. We've got a trimmed down set of questions for those, you know, for the board, and another trimmed down set of questions for the staff. And these are those questions. So as Marie said, she'll give you the questions, she won't give you the answers. So these are the questions worded a little differently, aligned with the standards. And I think, you know, if you wanted to, you could work with these groups of people and try and push it to them to answer the questions and ask them to take on some ownership of it. So that's one thing.
Sorry, Kay, are all of those resources available now, or only as because I know I got the governance one, and is there a list of these?
There's more. Yeah, there is more. Do you need them right now? Because I can email them to you, Steph, if you want.
That'd be great, because we're starting to do self-assessment and I'm trying to allocate it out,
Okay.
delegate rather than, but not right now, like in the next few days or whatever would be great. Yep. Thank you.
Okay.
And can I ask for them too, please?
Yeah, sure. Okay, no problem.
Thank you.
All right, I'll send them out, and next week, it usually takes Lisa a few days. Next week, she'll post the recording of this video, and there'll be resources sitting underneath the video as well. So they'll be available on the site, but I'm happy to email them to you both now. I've got both of your addresses. So yeah. Cool. So look, I better wind up. Marie's a big fan of the top tips to share the load. I would say sponsorship, it's got to come from the top. And better than everybody thinking, you know, World Peace is a good idea and we're all in favour of it, I would be asking people to put their money where their mouth is. So, you know, it would be things like, you know, can we get some more time? You know, can we give staff a few more hours paid work to do this? Can we add it into their KPIs? Like, you know, it actually has to be done. So, you know, it's not that, oh, you know, you can go to the meeting if you've got time. It's, it's much more of this is your responsibility, and you know you'll be assessed against this. So I don't think that's unreasonable. The organisation is being assessed against this, and it's critical. So it should trickle down to everybody. So thinking about some small KPIs that can be introduced into people's work plans could be a way of getting better engagement from people. So it's like, all right, you've been allocated, you know, a CQI, you know, we're going to develop our complaints process. So these, you know, these 2 people in the organisation are going to lead it, and that becomes one of their KPIs for the quarter or the year or whatever time period you want. So, you know, that'd be my recommendation, is that, you know, just people saying that this is really important doesn't really have legs. You know, it's really like, you know, what really brings it to life for people is you've actually got some skin in the game. Focus, well, we've kind of talked about focus with trying to like trim down what you ask people to do. So asking them to focus on specific parts of the self-assessment process is a way of making it seem less daunting. And yeah, accountability and sponsorship. But I think the other thing, I think Jenny had a really good example of this, project management 101. Am I right, Jen? You allocate people tasks and then you bring it to a meeting. You go, how are you tracking with that? Because, you know, by the 3rd meeting, if they keep saying, oh, I was too busy to do it, it starts to get a bit embarrassing. So I think, you know, you do actually need to hold people accountable for what they commit to do. So ask them to do it, ask them a time frame. So like, you know, can we get this in 3 months' time or whatever it is, so that you're not just constantly chasing people, but it's coming back to them. And if you use the BNG portal, you can actually allocate them tasks and it will send them a reminder that it's due as well, if you wanted to get clever with that. So, or you can just send them reminders yourself. But anyway, look, that's my big bit of wisdom for the day. I don't know if anybody would like to add anything to that. Silence.
Good first presentation, Kay.
Oh, thank you, Steph. Well, if anybody's watching this on recording, hi. And I hope it's been helpful. And the resources will be posted on the Highwell website. I think that's just amazing, isn't it? So thank you again for attending. Thank you for our, I'm just going to stop sharing. Here I am again. Thank you for the words of wisdom from the people that have been there already. Appreciate your involvement. And hopefully we'll see you all next month.
Great, thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
Kay. Thanks,
Just a wave.
everybody.
Just a wave goodbye.
Bye.
See you all. Okay, bye.
That's